Hundreds have been killed in months of protests in Nicaragua, which explains why this roundabout is covered with crosses. They represent the first victims, many of them students, most of them unarmed. It all started quite suddenly. On April 18th, a small protest against pension reform was attacked by supporters of President Daniel Ortega. The images of pensioners and students being beaten up brought more people to the streets. When it turned deadly, hundreds of thousands joined in to demand justice and the removal of Mr. Ortega. Many more have died since these crosses were planted. According to some estimates, 350 in just the first 3 months. The killings also unleashed a wider anger at the way the country has been run, and these metal trees, and there are hundreds of them over the city, became a symbol of it. They are a pet project of President Ortega's wife, who also happens to be his vice president. His critics accuse Mr. Ortega of running the country like a corrupt family business and that he will do anything to establish a dynasty of his own. He says the protests are a coup and that protesters want to do with his democratically elected government what they have done with many of his wife's metal trees. The barricades made with these cobblestones are another important symbol of the revolt. A symbol of physical resistance, but also a powerful echo from the past. The 1979 revolution that first brought Mr. Ortega to power used these exact same cobblestones in exactly the same way to fight against Anastasio Somoza, the last of the brutal dynasty who ruled Nicaragua for more than 40 years. For many, the fact that the protesters felt they needed them to protect themselves against the crackdown ordered by Mr. Ortega proves he's slowly becoming the very same thing he once fought against. A big difference with 1979, however, is that the current president is not facing armed guerrillas, but mostly youngsters armed with these homemade mortars that are no match for the military-grade weapons used by the government and its supporters. This explains why, even though there have been deaths on both sides, the vast majority of them have been protesters. Mr. Ortega's government has been widely condemned for using lethal force, including paramilitaries. He has also been accused of allowing extrajudicial killings, disappearances, even torture. Now to our final symbol, the mask. Ones like these have been worn by many protesters, including at this rally. Fittingly, they come from El Huehuense, an old play about fooling the colonial authorities. The Sandinistas also used them back in 1979, and they have always been a symbol of resistance against state oppression. But lately, they have been replaced by a far more sinister side. The balaclavas used by Mr. Ortega's paramilitaries, as they go about getting rid of the barricades and hunting down the protesters. For many, they bring back memories of Latin American death squads, making them fear that Nicaragua might be moving to an even darker place.